These particular Muslims didn't call themselves white. They looked upon themselves as human beings, as part of the human family, and therefore they looked upon all other segments of the human family as part of that same family. So I said that if Islam had done that for them, perhaps if the white man in America would study Islam, perhaps it could do the same thing for him.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum, brothers, sisters, friends, guests. Good afternoon. I'm Edward Ahmed Mitchell, the Deputy Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event, In the Room with Malcolm, that we celebrate today on and we observe today on the 56th anniversary of his martyrdom. I'm here today with my co-host, Afaf Nashr. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Afaf. Please, how are you doing? And introduce yourself.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Edward. As always, it's a pleasure to be here with my care family, and in particular for this program. I'm really, really pleased to be a part of this particular program about our brother, Malcolm X. And for those of you that don't know me, I am the Executive Director for CARE New York's chapter of CARE, where we all do in the family dedicate ourselves to the civil rights and the empowerment of Muslim Americans, which is exactly what our brother Malcolm was about.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we as American Muslims, as members of CARE especially, recognize that we stand upon the shoulders of those who came before us, including Brother Malik al-Shabazz, that his legacy of speaking truth to power, no matter the consequences, is something that honestly none of us really live up to, but we try to and we want to, inshallah. And so today, the anniversary of his martyrdom in the midst of Black History Month, we felt it was very important to honor him and remember him. And what we're going to do, inshallah, today is hear from people who knew Brother Malcolm, who interacted with him, who were impacted by him when he was with us. And then we're also, inshallah, going to hear from people who never met him, but have nonetheless been impacted by him and are trying to carry on his legacy, inshallah. And I want to note, Afaf, that we got some news today out of New York that I think is, I think we want to share with people, very relevant. Do you want to tell them a bit about what we just heard today, Afaf, about Malcolm X and his assassination?
Sure. So there has been new uncovered news stories breaking now about an NYPD detective who was around during Malcolm X's time, and apparently he was, what he says, a deathbed confession was essentially revealed in which he says he was coerced into infiltrating into the entire nation, and in particular into the circles of Malcolm X. And amongst the things that are alleged in this letter is that, for example, his job to make sure that his security guards just days before his assassination were arrested. So from what we understand at this point, the NYPD and the FBI were allegedly participating in what occurred. We don't know exactly what occurred. The details are still under investigation, but it certainly has opened up eyes and ears, and CARE New York, as well as National and others that are interested in making sure that the truth comes out about Malcolm X's assassination. We want to pull for that investigation and make sure that the public ends up finding the full truth of what occurred on that fatal day.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the Manhattan DA has indicated that they have been reviewing, these new allegations for a few months. The FBI has not commented, perhaps no surprise there, but I think we all knew that there was more to the assassination than what we were told, and this is very disturbing, very concerning, and we will continue to press on this issue to find the truth, inshallah. And in the meantime, continue to carry on his legacy, because the people who killed Malcolm X and the people who enabled the assassination of Malcolm X wanted to not just kill a man, but stop a movement, right? And they failed, because Malcolm X's legacy has endured long past his martyrdom. And we today, inshallah, are going to make sure that his legacy, his memory, and his message continues, no matter what any agency or individuals think of that, inshallah. So with that, we want to start off the program by first playing a brief video, 5 minutes, of Brother Malcolm speaking in 1964. This is, some of you may have seen this, many have not. This is an interview he did with a Canadian broadcasting company in which he discusses racism, Islam, and his belief in the importance of international solidarity in the fight against racism, and how Islam motivated his new views. And this is so important because what we've noticed on the anniversary of his assassination is that many people will now celebrate his life, even people who are on all sides of the political spectrum. But you often see him being, how would I say this, Afaf, watered down a bit or misappropriated, you could say, sometimes. And one of the ways people sometimes do that is to ignore the role that Islam played in his life and his views, which is fundamental. You can't have Malcolm X without Islam, right?
Absolutely. So, they want to make his legacy secular, essentially.
Right. Exactly right. I read an article today in a popular leftist magazine that celebrated his life, but essentially portrayed him as a secular socialist and completely ignored the religious identity that motivated him. So we're going to play this brief video, and then we're going to bring on our special guests to talk about their experiences with Malcolm and also how he has impacted them.
If you still believe, as I think you certainly did at the time you were allied to the Black Muslim movement, in a segregated black nation in North America.
I don't believe in any form of segregation or any form of racism. I'm against any form of segregation and against racism.
Am I right in saying that the Black Muslim movement, which you have left, did believe in that?
Well, Elijah Muhammad taught his followers that the only solution was a separate state for black people. And as long as I thought he genuinely believed that himself, I believed in him and believed in his solution. But when I began to doubt that he himself believed that that was feasible, and I saw no kind of action designed to bring it into existence or bring it about, then I turned in a different direction.
Are you still a Muslim yourself?
Oh, yes. I'm a Muslim. I believe in the religion of Islam, which believes in brotherhood, complete brotherhood of all people. But at the same time that I believe in this brotherhood, I don't believe in forcing my desire for brotherhood upon those who aren't willing to accept it.
Of course, I think the Christians would say that they also believed in brotherhood. What did you say to that?
I'd say they believe in it, but don't practice it.
That'd be a pretty good answer.
Sir, when the muezzin goes up in the minaret twice a day, he cries to the world, there is but one God, and he is Allah. Do you deny that there is a Christian God?
The muezzin does this 5 times a day.
5 times, and I only heard him twice.
Well, you were fortunate to hear him twice. But he does this 5 times a day, and the same God that he says that he expresses the existence of is the God that the Christians profess to believe in themselves, and the God that the Jews believe in. One God, the creator of the universe. The Muslims believe in the God that created the universe, and I think the Christians do, and the Jews do. Now, as long as all of them are talking about the creator, the Jews may call him Jehovah, and Christians may have another name for him. Those who are Arabic speaking refer to him as Allah. Well, we believe in the same God.
Now, as the Muslim religion advances in the United States, are you modernizing it or sticking with the old faith? For example, the complete segregation of the sexes.
I think that everything today on this earth is being modernized. Religious principles and practices, as well as political and other things.
Now, when you went to Mecca, this is a very sacred and forbidden city. I tried to get to Mecca myself and certainly didn't make it, not being a Muslim. But how would they accept you as one? You're an American. There are few American Muslims.
This is true. And by being an American and not having not being able to speak the Arab language, I did strike a snag, a very serious snag. But I was fortunate to have been pretty well known by the officials in Arabia, and they knew too that I had accepted Orthodox Islam. It had been highly publicized in the paper, and I became a guest of the state. I was a guest of Prince Faisal, the present King Faisal, and they made it possible for me to go before the committee, Hajj committee or Hajj court, who examines you and asks you questions about your belief, and if you pass it, then you are okay to go to Mecca. But it's
you would
true.
have to have a translator then.
I had one. Then realizing that our problem in America, that we are black Americans, and we have a problem that goes beyond religion, we formed a group known as the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And the objective of this organization is non-religious, number one. Any Negro can belong to it. And the objective of that organization is to bring about a condition that will guarantee respect and recognition of the 22 million black Americans as human beings. We feel that the problem, number one, of the black man in America is beyond America's ability to solve. It's a human problem, not an American problem or a Negro problem. And as a human problem or a world problem,
We feel that it should be taken out of the jurisdiction of the United States government and the United States courts and taken into the United Nations in the same manner that the problems of the black man in South Africa, Angola, and other parts of the world, and even the way they're trying to bring the problems of the Jews in Russia into the United Nations because of violation of human rights. We believe that our problem is one not of violation of civil rights, but a violation of human rights. Not only are we denied the right to be a citizen in the United States, we're denied the right to be a human being.
Mr. X, may I thank you very much for coming on our program and perhaps clearing away some of the cobwebs of misconception that some of us might have had about your belief. And I think you're very...
And that was Malik al-Shabazz himself in his own words, I think expressing thoughts of thought that are still very relevant to us today.
Yes, absolutely. May Allah have mercy upon him. Alhamdulillah.
Ameen. So now let's bring on our first two guests, inshallah. We're going to welcome on Dr. Ahmed Osman and the Executive Director of CARE National, Brother Nihad Awad. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Nihad, Dr. Osman.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you very much.
Nihad to do the honors of introducing our special guest.
Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you very much, Edward, Sister Afaf, and all those who are watching and sharing this video. This is a very important day and moment. Actually, it is like 3:15. I believe from what I read around 3:30, 56 years ago, which is like 15 minutes from now, Malcolm X, also as known as Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, has died. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him mercy and Jannah, and grant his family and his daughters sabr, patience, and perseverance. His death that happened 56 years ago still resonates with all of us. Those who knew him, like Dr. Ahmed Osman, which I will have the pleasure to introduce him in a moment, or people like us who came generations after him and have the honor to hope to do his continue with his legacy of standing up for what Malcolm X. When after I read his autobiography book by Alex Haley, and after watching his film in 1992, I believe, when I was in Minneapolis, it really shaped my perception about civil rights and human rights work. Everything I do at CARE and all of us are really driven by our understanding of Malcolm X's conviction, courage, his ability to speak truth to power, and that's why they assassinated him. They assassinated him because they feared his truth and courage. There's a lot to talk about him today, but generations after that, his name and his legacy resonates around the world. I have the esteemed honor right now to introduce to you someone who knew personally Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Brother Malcolm X, when he was alive. And I knew Dr. Ahmed Siddiq Osman, who's with us here on the screen, who lives in Maryland. I've known Brother Ahmed for many years, since we started CARE, and he was working with International Graphics, and he was in charge of Amana Publishing. He will tell me stories about Malcolm X and his engagement and his interactions with him, and also what he did, what Brother Ahmed did after the death of Malcolm X, rahimahullah. And I would like him to share his stories with him, when he met him first, and how he learned from him. And I'm sure Brother Ahmed has also some impact on Malcolm X himself. Dr. Ahmed Osman is from Sudan. He came to the United States as a student, and I'll let him talk about it. So Dr. Ahmed Osman, welcome to CARE show, and I know he's a big supporter and alhamdulillah, and he tells me always about the connection between the legacy of Malcolm X and the work that CARE has been doing for the American Muslim community and African Americans. So Dr. Ahmed Osman, thank you very much for joining us. And please tell us when did you hear about Malcolm X first, and how did you meet him?
Thank you very much, Brother Nihad. It's really a great pleasure to be with you and the other brothers and sisters. And in fact, what you people are doing, this was a vision of Malcolm. One of the things that he wanted to be done. Well, I came here to the United States. First time I came when I was in high school in 1960. There was a program that was sponsored by the New York Herald Tribune. They used to bring the students from about 40 countries to come and live in the United States with American families for 3 months to discuss issues about their different countries. So I came representing Sudan in 1960 for 3 months. At the end of it, President Nkrumah invited all of us to visit Ghana and to attend the first conference of the independent African countries. So after that, I went back to my home and I entered my home university. Then in the second year, I applied and I got a scholarship at Dartmouth College. I was sponsored by the class of 1956, and it was really a beautiful scholarship. For it entailed that I spent all my vacations with the families of the class of 1956 so that they will come and to know me much closer. So in 1963, many of them, of course, worked in the Wall Street area. So they fixed me with an internship job with Marine Midland Bank in the Wall Street area. So I was in that summer of 1963 in New York. It happened that a Sudanese, he was on his way to Sudan. He stopped by New York, and he wanted me to show him New York. And he had only half of a day. So I told him, where can I take you? So I better take you to Harlem. Because if you go to Sudan and you tell your friends you have been to New York, they will ask you, did you go to Harlem? And if you say no, they wouldn't believe that you visited New York. So we went to Harlem. So it was a Sunday afternoon. We came strolling around 116 and Lenox Avenue. And then we came just face to face in front of Muhammad's Temple number 7. So I knew that Malcolm used to preach there, but I never met him before. I heard about him because the first book about the nation of Islam was written by Eric Lincoln, the Black Muslims, and he was invited to Dartmouth College. So I told my friend, why don't we go inside and see, and see what this man is going to say. So we went there and we welcomed at the entrance by the Fruit of Islam. Of course, they wouldn't allow anybody who was not black to enter. So I introduced myself and my friend. We are your brothers from Africa, from Sudan. So they welcomed us. So we entered, and it happened that Malcolm was talking to the congregation of about 500 people. So that was my first, impression of him. And he was, of course, a magnetic person. I haven't seen, be it in America or elsewhere, anybody who can, when he came to Dartmouth, they described him that in his lecture that he hypnotized the students, so he really has such a presence when he talks. You are really taken up by what he says. So after he finished, he opened the floor for questions. So I raised my hand, introduced myself and my friend. I told them that we are your Muslim brothers from Sudan, and we are like one building, as our Prophet said. Each part is strengthening the other part. But I told him, Brother Malcolm, you accepted Islam. because in Islam, there is a total brotherhood of all human beings. And here you come and you condemn categorically the white people as the devils. And this is contrary to the spirit of Islam. Of course, the congregation was really quite upset about my speech, a stranger just coming in, not invited, challenging their leader. So they started, showing their, annoyance. And then Malcolm told them, no. Let him speak up his mind. I have been to Sudan, he said. I visited Sudan. I went to Khartoum. I went to Omdurman. He said he was most impressed with Omdurman, where he said he met the most beautiful brothers and sisters he ever met in his life. But he said, when I went to Khartoum, I found a white devil. I can see the contrast, of course. Omdurman is the national city of Sudan. And when Sudan was liberated by the Mahdi in 1885, Mahdi transferred the capital from Khartoum to Omdurman. Then when Britain reconquered Sudan in 1898, they returned the capital to Khartoum. 1959, Khartoum was a cosmopolitan city, and for a stranger who comes, he goes and he really doesn't see the Sudanese. So I told him, Brother Malcolm, no. There is no discrimination in Islam. And he said, brother, the Quran condemns a white man. I told him, I challenge you. Show me any verse. So he opened the Quran and he read for me the verse, if I remember it correctly, I think verse 102, Surah 20, in which the verse, وَيَوْمَ نَحْشُرُ الْمُجْرِمِينَ زُرُقًا. The word زُرُقًا comes, which in Arabic, of course, it means blue. So Malcolm interpreted this meaning that this refers to the blue-eyed white devils. I told him no. Anyway, we differed on the interpretation. Then he invited us for dinner next door at the Salam restaurant. And I had to apologize because I had to take my friend to the airport. So we exchanged addresses. And that is how our relationship started. So when I went back to Hanover, I sent him some booklets about Islam. So he started writing to me. So this is how our communication started.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. So obviously, was it when you exchanged this, correction to the perception of whites from the Islamic perspective, was he already in transformation? Was he still in the Nation of Islam, or he was leaving the Nation of Islam?
No, he was full-blown in the Nation of Islam.
Okay.
And this, of course, was before the Kennedy assassination and the aftermath of, his statement about Kennedy's assassination. But at that time, he was still, the national spokesman of the Nation of Islam. And in fact, his first letters to me started with giving blessing to Elijah Muhammad, the messenger of Islam, to the lost nation of Islam in the bewilderment of North America.
Do you have copies of those letters between Malcolm X and you?
Unfortunately, you see, I was in Kuwait, and I left Kuwait after the invasion in August 1990. I just took my family across the border to Saudi Arabia, hoping to come back. The following day, the borders were closed. I couldn't go back. My home was pillaged. I lost everything except one letter. I think it was the second letter that he sent me. I still keep that letter.
Okay.
And Dr. Osman, I guess the question becomes, what happened next, right? So you interacted with letters, And we know the transformation he went through. Publicly, we know about that, but behind the scenes, what was happening? What were your other interactions with him, you know, in the time leading up to his passing?
Okay, of course, after his statement about the assassination of President Kennedy, he was suspended by Elijah Muhammad for 90 days. He completely submitted. And you see, the suspension in the Nation of Islam is really very severe. In fact, his brother was suspended before. And when his brother came to him, Malcolm refused to meet his brother because he was suspended. His own brother, his blood brother, he refused to meet him. So he was suspended completely. Socially, he could not interact with anyone in his congregation. He could not speak to the media, and he was the only one who could address the media. And he submitted. After 90 days, they wouldn't leave the submission. So he knew that it was a breaking point. At that time, he started coming to the mosque, which was the only mosque in Manhattan, at 1 Riverside Drive on the 72nd Street, where I used to make my Juma prayers there. At that time, Dr. Mahmoud al-Shawarbi, he was a professor at the University of Cairo. He was on leave for 1 year, and he was the director of the center. So he started coming and pray. In fact, during his suspension, he used to come and pray with us. So after the prayer, you know, I would sit with him and chat with him. And that is the time when we started pressing him to go on pilgrimage to Mecca.
And so then Dr. Osman, you know, some time went by. He traveled to Africa. He went overseas. He went on Hajj. You know, what other interactions you have? I mean, in the time leading up to his passing.
Okay. In fact, when he came to leave to Saudi Arabia, of course, he made the Shahada as an Orthodox Muslim, and his Shahada was written by Dr. Shawarbi. And then we gave him a copy of the book that was just translated, The Eternal Message of Muhammad, Risala al-Khalda, by Azam Basha. Azam Basha was the first Secretary General of the Arab League. So we impressed on him that when he goes to Mecca, he should meet his son, Dr. Omar Azam, who was an architect deputy to renovate the Grand Mosque in Mecca. So when he went there, of course, he was lost for 1 week, staying in Medina al-Hujjaj, until later on, he was able to make a telephone call to Dr. Omar Azam. So Omar Azam came with the son of the late King Faisal, Muhammad al-Faisal. And so they met him, and they took him to Azam Basha. And here he comes and he meets the fairest, blonde, blue-eyed Muslim, Azam Basha. So it was already Hajj. So they asked him, where are you staying? He said, I'm staying nowhere. I'm in Medina al-Hujjaj. At that time, all the hotels were full. There was no place they could put him in an hotel. So Azam Basha, he had a suite at Al-Kandra Hotel, Jeddah Palace. So he told him, okay, I will give you my suite and I will move to my son's home and live with him. And Malcom just couldn't believe it. He tried to protest. He said, no, it is done. So he couldn't, you know, take it. Here, there is this guy. He said the blondest of the blonde, blue-eyed, you know. And he said, this guy, he never met me before. You know, he never met any Negro before. Of course, Azam Basha knew about Malcom. He used to follow him in the press and in the TV and radio. So he knew who he was. And he said, look here, this guy is going to lose a lot by getting to know me. And my experience told me in America, nobody will give you something without something in exchange. And here there is this man, he will lose everything. And he gives his bed, his suite, to a man that he never met in his life. So this is started his changeover, you see. Then he comes, of course, he goes through the pilgrimage of Hajj. And of course, all of you know about the Hajj. You know, how should I call it? The real equalizer of all the human beings, be you are a king or you are a beggar or whoever you are. And so he went the real transformation through the rituals of Hajj. And this was started, in fact, even before he met Hassan Pasha, when he was lost in Medina al-Hujjaj with all these pilgrims, Persians, Africans, just living with them, eating with them, praying with them, you know, and they couldn't communicate with him, but they communicated bodily, eating together, praying together, you know. So his changeover started, in fact, even he started when he took the first plane from Cairo to Jeddah. You know, he was there in the plane and he was invited to the cockpit by the pilot. He went there, he said, this is the first time I see a black man flying a plane. He said, I have traveled all through America, north, south, east, west. Nobody invited me to a cockpit. I even never thought that a black man could fly a plane until I saw this Egyptian flying his a plane of his country. So this is, you know, it was really gradually working over him. You know, when the plane was fully at Cairo, a pilgrim, an Egyptian who was already booked, he said, okay, I will give you my seat and try to catch another flight later on. So he started seeing, you know, how people were treating him, you know, even being a stranger, not knowing him, just because he is a Muslim, you see. So, of course, his changeover there came. And when he came back, of course, people were still doubting, you know, that he was really a pro-Muslim. And this is why wherever he went, he was stressing his commitment as an Orthodox Muslim. So at that time, at Dartmouth College, we had a program called Great Issues. They used to bring outstanding speakers to speak about the problems of the day to the seniors of the college. So they brought all these speakers. In fact, they invited Martin Luther King in 1962. So the student body, and that was the height of the Vietnam War. That was the height of the liberation movements in Africa. The Congo problem, South Africa problem, Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau. So it was really moments of change. And in fact, one of the things that attracted me to Malcolm, in fact, there were two things. One was, I was seeing that he was misinterpreting the true Islam. That was number one. Number two, I saw him the only voice echoing the liberation movements and the aspirations of Africans. Nobody would talk about, you know, these liberation movements or the Vietnam War or the Algerian War. It was only the voice of Malcolm. And he was the most wanted speaker on white college campuses, not black college campuses, white college campuses. So the student body requested, you know, the college administration to invite Malcolm, and the college declined. So I used to tell my friends, you know, about my experience, interaction with Malcolm. So the student body and the graduate council, they came to me, they said, Ahmed, we are going to invite Malcolm on our own as the undergraduate council, but we are short of money, and you know him. Could you please try to intercede and see if we could convince him to come? So I called him on the phone, and I told him, Brother Malcolm, I would like to have a favor. would like to invite you, but as you know, the student body has a limited budget, and they interrupted. Brother, don't speak about money. Anything you ask me, I will do it for you. So he came to our college on the 26th of January, 1965. And I remember it very well. It was in Ramadan. So the undergraduate council went to White River Junction in Vermont. They received him there, and they brought him to my dormitory, where we had a guest house where we used to entertain and host the guests of the college. So he came, and they had a WDCR radio, college radio, made an interview with him. Then we took him for dinner, and after dinner he went to the Spalding Auditorium at Hopkins Center. It was closed 3 hours before his lecture because there were not enough seats, only about 1,500 seats. And he gave a beautiful lecture. He had a standing ovation. So after the lecture, he answered the questions. He spent the night there. The following day, the students came and they fixed breakfast for him, and they had an informal chat with him. And Malcolm had two personalities. Malcolm was the private person, as we have seen him, as I have seen him personally, and my colleagues, white students, I saw him when he came to the college. And Malcolm, when he speaks on a platform or with a radio station or with a TV, as a private person, he's the most modest, humble, shy person. When he talks to you, you will feel as if you have known him years before, not at that moment. Even to a white person, when he talks, he never makes him feel as a guilty person. He talks to him in the third person, you see. So he has this kind of charisma, when he talks to you, even about the white people. He doesn't say that, addresses that you people committed, but he makes them to be responsible about the situation, and that they have a role to ameliorate, to correct the situation. So I haven't seen any other speaker or leader who can have that kind of communication for his message, not compromising it, at the same time to make you part of the problem and part of the solution. And above all his aspiration was in the future young generation, young people, white and black people.
So, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, subhanAllah, Dr. Osman, first of all, thank you for sharing all of this. I mean, you don't know how much I wish that I could have been in that auditorium, one among the 1,500 that heard him speak. SubhanAllah. I took away a couple of things from what you said, and one of them obviously is the extraordinary blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave our brother Malcolm with regards to his ability to hypnotize people. But even when you spoke about how humble he was in the private arena, you could see how humble he was just in terms of what you talked about him being suspended and accepting that suspension fully, but then the sincerity of his Islam always showing through and making sure that he went for his salah, even though he was really, ostracized by the nation at that point. And subhanAllah, Allah had given you the ability to intertwine your life with his, and you saw his transformation. What a thing to witness, and that's probably more valuable than the letters and anything else. But just to see that experience little by little. You did say something that made me a little bit curious, if you don't mind my following up with it. You said he was the #1 speaker for white college campuses, but not Black colleges. And it just made me sort of, wonder why that was. And the reason that I ask is because, we see him, of course, as a Black American and as a Muslim American. And I would pray and hope that, if we had someone like him today, or if he was here, that he would be most sought after within Muslim circles. So why not Black colleges of the time? Wasn't he not speaking to them?
Well, you see, at that time, Black colleges, you see, were not as prominent as white colleges, you see. And for instance, you would say that I don't think that he was ever invited to Howard University, being a Black college in the capital of the country, you see. And I could see that, because even many Black colleges had financing from some of the white quarters. And I think they will think maybe twice. I would, of course, know that the young people would like to hear him. But the administration, you see, the thing is this, even when he spoke, I think, twice at Harvard University. In one of the lectures, the person who objected to his speech was a Black professor. You see, the middle class Black men were afraid to be associated with him. And Ozzie Davis said it plainly, that our living depended on the white establishment. So a lot of people, even Ozzie Davis, used to meet him privately. You see, they would never, make it something open. A lot of people, had that kind of thing. Just like when he died, who is the person who castrated him? The highest Black or the Negro American in the American government, Carl Rowan, the director of the United States Information Agency. He was the highest Black American in the government. On the day of the funeral, he came blasting the Africans for their reaction, saying Africans did not understand Malcolm. Malcolm was an ex-thief, an ex-addict, a pimp, and hustler, and the African did not understand him. He said that on the day of the funeral. When Spike Lee made the movie about him, what did Carl Rowan say? He said Malcolm is not fit to have a movie like that about him. And here, who is Carl Rowan? Carl Rowan, he was a journalist, and he was from the South, and I would have expected a journalist like him to be the first person to stand next to Malcolm. But Carl Rowan, unfortunately, you see, maybe, I don't know if you know his story in New York, in Washington, about this young kid who was in a hot summer, just wanted to have a plunge in his swimming pool, and here he comes with his pistol, and he shot at him. And it turned out that he was one of these people who was against the ownership of firearms. And he had that firearms without having a license for it. So, you see, the bourgeoisie, Black people, did not want to be associated with a person like Malcolm. And these are the people whom Malcolm used to call Uncle Toms. And that is why Malcolm differentiated between the field Negro and the house Negro.
Yes, that famous speech. So
Yeah.
Dr. Osman, we're going to pause this segment now as we've got 2 more special guests to bring on. But stay with us because we're going to bring everyone on together, inshallah, at the end of the program to take a few questions from the audience. And the last question we're going to ask you at the end is, what was your last interaction with him before he passed away, and how did his passing impact you? So don't answer that now, but that's going to be the question for you to address in the conclusion, inshallah. So stay with us. We're going to bring you and Brother Nihad back shortly, inshallah. Thank you both so much. Jazakallah khairan. Afaf, please welcome on our next guest. And make sure to unmute yourself, Afaf.
I believe that's going to be, is it Sister Aisha or Imam Dawood? There was a discussion between. Okay, so Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, I really enjoyed Dr. Osman, and now we have, for the pleasure of our guests and our own education, 2 people to speak with us. And of course, that is Imam Dawood, who's the CARE Executive Director of CARE Michigan, as well as a personal honor for me to introduce, and that is my sister Aisha Al-Adawiya from New York. Both of these people, of course, are well known within the Muslim circles, not just in New York, but across the nation and abroad. And of course, Brother and Imam Dawood has dedicated his life to civil rights and to educating those both within the organization at Michigan as well as externally in his personal capacity. And Sister Aisha is still someone that we all like to clamor around to learn from her as much as we possibly can. She's been the founder of Women in Islam. Throughout her entire life, she's dedicated herself to building community, building the brotherhood and sisterhood between Muslims, and continuously is forging ahead and is now really focused on, in my personal conversations with her, giving and entrusting that ability and power to the younger generation as well, just like our brother Malcolm X really wanted to see. So thank you, both of you, for joining us. It really is a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak to both of you and to learn from both of you.
Yes, thank you both so much for joining us. Assalamu alaikum. So, Sister Aisha, we want to begin with you if we can. And in fact, actually, Fab, I'm going to let you do the honor of asking the first question. I'm going to let our New York sisters here start us off. But we'll start with Aisha, and then we'll go to Imam Dawood, inshallah.
Sure. And I believe, Sister Aisha, what we want to know is just maybe a little bit about yourself, of course, and then if you can then move on and tell us a little bit about your interactions with Brother Malcolm, what you know of him, and what you can share with us that we can take and learn from, inshallah.
Well, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Well, I've been telling everyone that I can remember the time when we could count these kinds of events on one hand. Now we're competing for dates and time slots. There are so many. So, the ayat that talks about the martyr not being dead but alive, is really so exemplified in Malcolm's, Haj Malik Shabaz's example. So I'm grateful to join you, and I'm honored to be here. Wonderful to see Brother Ahmed Osman and the rest of you there. Let's see, I come from Alabama, born in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and I remained there until I left New York in the early 60s and landed in New York and found my way to Greenwich Village, which is where I began to be educated and a grown-up person, and totally inspired by Malcolm's example and the teachings. Growing up in the segregated, unequal South, many of the atrocities, injustices that CARE works for these days and the rest of us were prevalent in my environment growing up as a child. So I had internalized that very early on. So I had this burning desire to resist. And, being a young person, you are raised by parents who try to protect you so that you can live to fight another day. So some of the lessons that they taught, give way on the sidewalk if you pass a white person, lower your eyes, these kinds of things But some of those lessons, you don't talk back ever. You don't sass. It's called. But those lessons, many of them, most of them, didn't take with me. So at a very early age, I was taken to the jailhouse and, threatened to be beaten if I didn't, behave myself and these kinds of things. So those were great learning experiences for me. But when I came to New York and encountered Malcolm talking, I should clarify because I love this man so much and I talk so much about him, and he is really my mentor. Um, and often I say that after the Prophet Muhammad, really Malcolm is my example, and I don't know how to explain that other than it is, because he's had this incredible impact on my life. But when I came to New York, I didn't know Malcolm personally. Yeah, this is what I want to say, because many people think that I did. And the closest I got was like the example that I give is, that map that says "Find Waldo." you know, you would go to the meeting, and after you went through the pat down to get into the venue, you were so far back that that's all you could see was a dot, but you could hear the message. Yeah, and that was profound, life altering. As our brother has told us. So um, I didn't join the nation, but I followed very closely many of the teachings about how to, as Malcolm would say, wake up, and get on God's side. And so I have a collection of tapes here. If you look behind me, you'll see much of that. So my life has been absolutely molded by listening to Malcolm's message and imbibing, his teachings. And as a result of that, I found a way to fight back, but with integrity, right? I found a religion that allowed me to speak truth to power, to agitate when things were not right, to be bold enough to fight back, right? And always with integrity. That was the message that I got. If you watch him, you'll see that he's always poised and speaking in a way that, as the brother has told us, it's just mesmerizing. But the point is so well taken and so poignant. And so those messages, as a young, impressionable girl, really resonated very deeply with me. So I feel I know him personally, and actually I do through his own voice. I've probably listened to every tape of his speeches that exist. So I grew up on that, and I continue to listen to those messages. When you need to be inspired. My husband used to get on the floor and put these tapes on, and he would say, "Don't bother me, I'm charging now." Yeah. So it's like my battery, it's like Malcolm's message resonates with me daily and it really informs me in every action that I venture out to take in pursuit of justice. And again, not just for myself or for Black people, as he said in that message in Oxford, that he didn't care what color a person was, so long as they stood, for justice. Yeah. But the primary message was to bring awareness to the injustices that were impacting Black people, and particularly in the United States. And one thing that I want to say also is that, and I know that CARE has the wherewithal to do this. I'm noticing over a period of time now, more and more, Haj Malik is being cast as a civil rights leader, right? And in fact, he was a human rights leader. So I hope that moving forward, CARE would take that on to begin to correct some of the language that's attached to this man. And, you know, it's like we can go on forever talking about Malcolm, and there are so many threads and nuances that we discover each time we talk because it's so rich and deep, you know. So you can stop me, you know, we can talk some more, inshallah.
Yeah. Aisha, let me ask you one follow-up question before we go to Imam Daoud, which is, you know, how did his passing, his assassination, impact you? Did that play any role in you actually eventually embracing Islam? And you know, today, you know, we can't know what he'd be doing if he was alive today, but, you know, what is your advice to young people who want to carry on his legacy, who want to carry on the work that he was doing? You know, what advice would you give them today? As someone who got to see him speak, got to see him and be inspired by him, what advice would you give those of us who are around today?
Well, first and foremost, I think that integrity is key here. If we can say one thing about Haj Malik, is that this was a man of integrity and very strong conviction and fearless, in fact, in the face of serious danger. So that we see how Islam really was the foundation, you know, the footing beneath this man. And it's something that we really do not to patronize his message or his legacy, but to really understand who this man, I say is, because I rarely talk about him in the past tense. Neither did his wife. She still called him her husband, you know, years after he was gone. So I would say, first and foremost, learn your history. You must, the title is Upon the Shoulders, you know, you have to know those shoulders. So history is really critical for young people to know. So learn your history, you know, find networks, people to talk to grow with, so that, and you must be deeply grounded in your religious tradition, right? You have to know what Islam is. You don't want to make it up. You want to know what it is, right? And then Malcolm used to pray that Allah would take the fear out of their hearts, so that when we go out to face the demons, right, that we are not afraid, yeah? But again, still standing in serious integrity, right? So those are the messages. Know your history, right? Pray for sustenance from Allah, you know, to remove fear from us and to increase us in our Islam, our deen, our practice, our way of life, and to see beyond ourselves and our own individual families, but that we embrace the larger community, right? The ummah. So, and I like to see the bridge, you know, it's not black or white, right? But it's this bridge, it's continuity. We have brothers and sisters all over the world, literally. And I love you know, this concept of ummah is something is very close to my heart. So we have to embrace that. We have to uphold that. We have to be bold enough, standing in integrity, speak truth to power, and at the same time, be humble. You know, when you walk into a room fully armed with your principles, right, you can be humble. And by being so, you have an opportunity to touch people's hearts. And that's the ultimate target, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, Sister Aisha. Stand by for us, inshallah. We're going to go to Imam Daoud, and then we're going to bring everyone on together, Dr. Osman, you, and Todd, for final closing remarks, inshallah. So Imam Daoud, let's go to you now. So, you know, the idea of this program is, one, to hear from people who saw Brother Malcolm, Brother Malik al-Shabazz, interacted with him, benefited from him at the time, but also to hear how people who never met him, never knew him, were never in the room with him, have been impacted by him. And so Imam Dawood, as an imam, first and foremost, a religious leader, a civil rights activist, just tell us, number one, how did Malcolm first impact your life when you were younger? Like, how did you first become aware of him? What impact did it have on you? And, today in your work now, how is that carried on? And I'll add on a third thing here, because I know you can take a three-part question, which is, if he were alive today, we got a lot of people praising him today, but how do you think, honestly, he would be treated today by people who are praising him widely? Just give us your frank assessment of what you think things might be like if he were with us today.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. First of all, before answering your questions to the best of my ability with God's grace, I'd like to thank and show honor to Dr. Ahmed Osman. May Allah preserve you.
Yeah.
And I could have sat and listened to him for another couple of hours, and would have been connected also to Auntie Aisha for her presence and her encouragement that she is always and continues to give to people such as ourselves, who stand on shoulders of people such as her, as being Americans. So may Allah preserve you both, and may Allah reward you with all that you continue to do on behalf of humankind, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In regards to Malcolm and his impact on me, first of all, he's one of the first faces I can clearly remember as seeing as a child. So for a little background, I have my mother's side of the family is 100% Christian. The Muslims are on the other side of the family, and my parents kind of split when I was young, and I moved to Virginia, and I was raised there for the most part in a Christian background. But I remember going to family members' homes. In one particular, there was a picture of Malcolm on the wall in one of the rooms, with a picture of him post-nation, glasses, goatee, black and white picture, and it had in this almost like Chinese-esque looking writing, "By any means necessary." And that picture just burned something into my heart of looking at that picture. Now, this is when I'm young. Fast forward, we start going into the age of middle school. I remember my dad, he had a, who's from Detroit, by the way, and he heard Malcolm. He went to high school across from Muhammad's Mosque #1 or Temple #1 in Detroit. Central High School is across the street from that mosque, which later became Masjid Wali Muhammad. And this is the first place that Malcolm ever spoke at after getting out of prison when he relocated to Michigan. The first place I ever gave khutbah to Jumu'at to, by the way, in the exact same building, in the exact same room. My father tried to get me to read the Autobiography of Malcolm X, and he had a first edition of that autobiography that came out. And I really wasn't motivated to read it. What got me motivated and to latch on to Malcolm X actually was a little bit later, a couple of years later, with the conscious rap music movement, hip hop in the late 80s, where rappers started to sample Malcolm. And one video in particular, I was in high school, there used to be this rap group called Boogie Down Productions. It came from the South Bronx. And they had a song, well, first the album cover was copying Malcolm. He said, "By any means necessary." Theirs was "By all means necessary." And they had a video called "My Philosophy," and Malcolm's face was shown all throughout it. And he was sampled in the song too, but his face was shown throughout the video while the rappers were on the stage. And one of those pictures was a picture that I saw growing up as a little kid, like in elementary school, even like younger than that. And that's what motivated me. Rap music's what motivated me to read the Autobiography of Malcolm X. I stopped identifying or I refused to go to church anymore around that time, like 14, 15 years old, which then led me to read a book on the seerah of the Prophet, alayhi afdalus salatu wasalam, and then to embrace Islam on my own terms, right? So, but we're talking about like the early 90s, right? So that's Malcolm in that sense was kind of like my murshid, if the Jama'ah was hip hop, conscious hip hop culture, if we can use that language. The Jama'ah was hip hop, and the murshid of the Jama'ah was Malcolm X for me. Rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. And that story is similar for many people of my generation that I've heard, including Muslims who are white, such as my friend Imam Suhaib Webb, who was inspired by Malcolm. We're from that same generation. As far as Malcolm and his impact on what I see our work is right now and what I try to embody is integrity to mission. And that includes even during that work, if there are individuals who do us wrong along the way. So I'll give you a prime example that like sticks in my mind. And it also relates to kind of like my background and what we would call the code of the streets that I grew up in, right? Living in Richmond, Virginia, but also going back and forth and spending some time in New York too. And at that time they called Bed-Stuy, do or die, just to give you a little background. Pre-gentrification. When Malcolm was put out of the nation, that FBI agents came to him, and he had a secret recorder in his house. So the FBI came and paid him a visit. He turned the recorder on, and this audio is on YouTube. If you haven't heard it, it's online. It's actually been uploaded. FBI agents came to him and tried to get him to give information about the inner workings of the Nation of Islam and to give information about people. And despite his dispute with Mr. Elijah Muhammad, he refused to take that difference and use that personality conflict against his people, right? So I try to work and operate upon this because in this work, there'll be people that will disrespect you, and there are things that can be done. And I've actually, may Allah forgive me. It's not as if I'm ma'soom or haven't done things perhaps in the most professional way all the time either. We strive to do the best that we can. But to try not, because I have, and this is for the broader community, and this is a challenge in as far as walking in the footsteps of Malcolm, just because we have a personal grievance and don't like people, that we shouldn't use it to tear down the community or tear down organizations just because we have a personal conflict. And this is one of the problems that we have in the Muslim American community with online campaigns, Facebook beefs, and things like this, where we end up doing more harm to ourselves and those who are not Muslims. And may Allah Azza wa Jal rectify our affairs. I can't say 100% how we would act today if Malcolm was alive, because he was a man of revolution, but evolution. So he was constantly a man of change. But what I can safely say is that the Malcolm X of February 21st, 1965, prior to his assassination on that day, even his life of the last year of his life, when he was out of the nation and what we would consider a Sunni Muslim, I think the vast majority of masajid and most Islamic organizations would be scared to death of him, would not invite him to be main stage on their conferences, and in fact, may even go to government organizations and agencies to try to not let him have a voice or a seat at the table. And the reason why I say that, because people less transformative of Malcolm have been undermined within our community and some of our middle class respectability politics, as Dr. Ahmed was mentioning before, of how many of the HBCUs and the black bourgeoisie wasn't fond of Malcolm while he was alive. Why I think that the Muslim the bourgeoisie component within inside of our community would be scared of death of Malcolm X if it was the February 1965 version of Malcolm in the American Muslim community today. That's my opinion, and Allah knows best. But if we're going to be celebrating Malcolm, we need to embrace the whole Malcolm, and instead of just trying to tokenize Malcolm or do like what Dr. Cornel West said has been done to Dr. King, where he said the Santa Clausification of Dr. King. Well, we don't need to make Malcolm X all warm and fuzzy either, and only take part of Malcolm. We take the Malcolm who was a family man, and the Malcolm who was about upholding Islamic morality, right? And we take the full Malcolm. We don't try to make him as some sort of woke secular Marxist type of figure. And I end with that.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Imam Do. Jazakallah khairan. So now let's bring everyone on together, inshallah. We want to wrap up by 4:30 at the latest. So let's bring back Dr. Osman. Let's bring back Brother Nihad for final thoughts and take any questions from the audience, inshallah. Sister Papa, I'll let you take them here, and I'll check the chat, the comments.
Yes. So I don't see in the chat, but what I would say is that I actually have a question, and I think it pertains to exactly what many of you have touched upon, and even goes back to the first question that I had with regards to the black colleges. And, Brother Dawood, you said that we would be afraid of him, and that we don't need to sanitize who and what he was. Having said that, would you all please just give me one particular and I know there's a lot, but one particular principle of Malcolm that you think we would still struggle with accepting and being able to vocalize without the fear that you were talking about? I mean, what aspect of him, what is it about him that would have set so many people to actually be afraid to bring him into our circles? Sister Aisha, would you like to start?
Aisha, you gotta unmute yourself.
Okay. Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Yeah. Malcolm, I don't like to call, I'm from the South. So we give titles to people, to elders and people that we have elevated to a certain place, because they've earned that. So I call him Hajj Malik Shabazz, or Brother Malcolm. In my work, I don't allow them to call me by my first name. So these I think it's very important to show respect like that. But I think that Brother Dawood's comments are well taken. There's no doubt that he would be still the pariah, because he personified that ayah in Quran that talks about standing up for justice, even if it's against yourself. He walked that walk, he exemplified that so profoundly for us, So absolutely most of us would run away, because those are hard truths that we are afraid to face, but we must face in order to create this more perfect union, right? This world that we want our children to grow up in, and their children's children to grow up in. So for sure, there are still a lot of us. I mean, today's the 21st, and then we have May 19th that will come up also, and we will do these programs. But as I said earlier, right, that's not enough, right? We have to really, really study the man, appreciate the sacrifices that he made, and he had a family. There are children that belong to him, and now by extension belong to us because of the sacrifices that they made. So we have a lot of work to do to catch up, you know, but he's still our black shining prince. And, Ossie Davis said it very beautifully. He died because he loved us so much. One of the things that he said, I find very beautiful. In one of his speeches, he talks about, we love our people so much that they think we hate them. You love your people so much that other people think you don't like them, which is not the case. So, yeah, we have to really be honest. We know the things that we have in common and that we can coalesce around, but we're in a time now where we have to be bold enough to go deep and dig out those roots that are starving for water, so that we can cleanse ourselves and then be the example for other people around us, inshallah. So it's true. We would run away, we would flee, right? But the few who would remain will be the beacons for us. And again, I think that Brother Dawood's words are very salient. It's like we have to admit the fact, this is February 21st, but this is just February 21st. For some of us, it's February 21st every day, all day, So we need to own that, inshallah.
Sister Aisha, thank you so much. Dr. Osman, let's jump to you, and then we'll hear from Nihad and Dawood, and I think at that time will be at time. Dr. Osman, I wanted to ask you the final question that we didn't get to earlier, which was, how did the assassination of Brother Hajj Malik al-Shabazz impact you? Same thought. I mean, we're talking now about his legacy and how we should be harnessing it today. Any thoughts you want to share about what we can do to carry on his legacy today? Feel free to share. But I'd love to hear how his assassination impacted you at the time, and then trace that forward to today.
Well, I really find the model of Brother Malcolm relevant everywhere. In the Muslim communities, as well as in the non-Muslim community. In the Muslim communities in America and in the Muslim world as well. And I believe what he has been saying, what he has been struggling against, are relevant to our homes also in Africa. Especially now, I find this new, transitional period we have come through, where many Islamic political groups have been able, for instance, to take power in some countries or to make the presence. Unfortunately, they are not reflecting the spirit of Islam the way Malcolm reflected it. And what I mean by that, if you are a Muslim leader, say in a Muslim country, in Islam, the qudwa, and that is being the model or the mentor, is very prominent. So, for instance, I just came from Sudan, where I spent about 10 months. And they are going through a very difficult period, economic problems. People queuing just to get bread, queuing to get gasoline, queuing for everything. And I used to go and queue with them. But I will never find any prominent person or minister or anybody in the presence so that the people can say they are also suffering the way we are suffering. You see? So this is really lacking, the qudwa of the leadership in the Muslim countries and also here, you see. And this is what distinguishes Islam from other ideologies or other, leadership thing, that the Muslim leader should really give in the way of his living, an example to others. If the others are going without, he should go without. So this is very important today. And this is why Malcolm was being co-opted by so many different organizations, from the leftists, from the rightists, and all of this, because he gave an example which is unique, which nobody has been able to give. Furthermore, Malcolm was critical of the Black community here in America, as well as the white community, because if you don't criticize the bad things, the vices within your community, you will not be able to bring it up. And so we should make our communities here not to be sensitive about bringing out the negative things within our community. And I think also it is very important for us in America to try to bring the presence of Malcolm in the schools. I have been noticing in the Maryland area, especially in the months of the so-called Black Month, which I, of course, started doubting it. We shouldn't have a Black Month. We should have, every month should be a Black Month for us. We shouldn't just put it in one month. In the school, for instance, I find, teachers giving the students compare between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And then they will say, Martin used to, exponent of nonviolence. Malcolm, exponent of violence. Okay? This needs to be corrected. And I think also CARE has to take, maybe some leadership there. If the American Constitution gives you the right to keep and carry arms, what for? To defend yourself. So Malcolm never used to say, go and attack. He said, defend yourself, just like other people are defending yourself, And this is, I think, very prominent, that when somebody says, for instance, by any means necessary, this was a kind of red line. Until recently, during the last 4 years, even the former president, I hear him every time saying, by any means necessary. So they started using the very thing that they were taking it against Malcolm, you see? And then the beauty of Malcolm was making it plain, making everybody, from the child, from the old person, just understanding the message in very simple terms, you see? So that's really one of his geniuses, in which we have to teach our leadership in the way they deal with the community, with the other people, how to handle these things. I think Malcolm is a school of leadership, really. This has to be dug in. You see, it's a school of leadership, which is unique in the 20th century, in the 21st century, even in the American leadership. The other thing I want to note also, on this day, we should not take Malcolm as a leader of the Black community. Malcolm is an American leadership. He is just like the founding fathers, if not higher from the founding father. Because the founding father did not defend everyone. Malcolm defended everyone, be they white or be they Black. He said, I am for the right and for justice, no matter for whom and against whom. That is the real leadership.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, Dr. Osman. Jazakallah khairan. So we're about time, so I'm going to go ready Had to share any final thoughts, any reaction, and then I'm going to ask Imam Dawood, same thing, and to close this with the dua, and Sister Afaf will wrap up the program, inshallah. So Nihad, Dawood, Afaf, inshallah.
Well, alhamdulillah, it has been, although I have heard so many times from Dr. Ahmed Osman today, almost everything he said was new to me and refreshing and very inspiring. And also, Sister Aisha, how many years have I known you? So many years. I did not know that you used to attend Al-Hajj Malik Shabaz's lectures. And mashallah, Dawood's, perspective, and Afaf and Edward, we are all in many ways different generations, obviously, as you can tell. We have been benefiting and reflecting and continue to learn about this man and his legacy. What I take away is the following from Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, rahimahullah, may Allah bless his soul. And this is true from the very first moment I learned about him in the early 90s when I saw the film Malcolm X, when African American brothers and sisters on college campus in Minneapolis, like Matthew Ramadan and Masjid Muhammad, they were my community when I landed in the US. And the first thing I learned was about Malcolm X and his personality. I did not know anything about him. But after I saw the film, it's like The Message by Mustafa Al-Aqad. It just molded my personality. It impacted me so much. And after I read the Autobiography of Malcolm X, it has become the textbook for my activism at CARE, alhamdulillah. So today I would say the work of CARE nationwide as the largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization, it's really the Sadaqa Jariyah, the continuous charity of Malcolm X. May Allah bless him and may Allah accept from him. Number two, what distinguished Malcolm X's personality, in my understanding, was his courage to allow himself to evolve and revolutionize. He was evolutionary and revolutionary. When he was in the Nation of Islam, he was trying to define Islam the way he was taught. So he defined Islam and black liberation. But when he discovered Islam, when he went to Hajj, and I quote, he said, "I believe in complete brotherhood of all people," then he allowed Islam to define him. And that courage cost him his connection, his membership with the Nation of Islam, his fame, his safety, and the safety of his family, and almost everything. But he gained the pleasure of Allah because he allowed Islam to define him and inform his advocacy and to shift completely. And it was so difficult and so embarrassing that the media will tell him, well, just a few weeks ago, you used to call the white the devils. And now you don't. I mean, it's not easy for a politician, to change position, to backtrack, so-called. But as Sister Aisha said, for justice, we comply, even against ourselves. So to me, he reminded me of Umar bin Khattab during the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, because he was a straight talker, straight shooter, and he was willing to accept the truth. So today I would say we should continue with the legacy of Malcolm X, but the focus is not on the person, because he himself started to focus on the message. And I think that's the lesson, that we have to focus on the message and the integrity and the straightforwardness that Malcolm X left behind, and that really distinguished him from any other leader of his generation. He was willing to sacrifice for what he believes, and he made the state and the establishment worry and afraid because he was about change. And finally, I would say he was infiltrated. The Nation of Islam was infiltrated by the government, by the FBI, by the New York police, and he was under surveillance. And CARE Day, between 06 and 08, was under surveillance by the FBI, according to Edward Snowden. And they tried to CARE. And CARE is smeared by so many people. But this is really the price. Because yes, he was controversial. We are, and I totally agree with Brother Dawood, that if Malcolm X was alive today with us, many established Black American and Muslim American organizations will be afraid to invite him because he will be politically too costly for them. And that's why young people are looking for leadership like Malcolm X. Controversial, but on the right side of history and justice. May Allah bless him. And I'm so honored to listen to Brother Ahmed Osman. I think we have to treasure him and record more with him and learn from his interaction with Malcolm X.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brother Nihad. We'll go to Imam Daoud to give us final remarks and dua, and then Sister Afaf will close the program, inshallah.
Just very briefly, going back to the question that you asked Auntie Aisha in regards to Malcolm, and to give it a more tangible example of why he also may be treated as hands-off. And I think this is a lesson of our political education for today, that our beloved Al-Hajj Malak al-Shabazz, rahimahullah ta'ala, he compared the so-called conservatives to wolves and the so-called liberals to foxes. And he said that when you have a sheep, that the wolf is more likely to get the lamb chopped than the wolf, because the wolf will howl, and you have a little time to guard your flock from the wolf. But the sneaky fox will show his teeth, even it's like a smile, and that's the one who's most likely to eat or get the lamb chop. He made the same connection between a wolf and the fox with the chicken coop. So my point is that Malcolm always stressed to us that we have primary alliance to principles, not parties or personalities. And we don't take any political party's platform, be it the right or the progressive left, as naqida. It's not a creed for us. And this is what Malcolm taught us. We're to be a people of principles, and there are no permanent alliances in politics. We have permanent interests. And I think this, especially in this particular political moment right now, when we're leaving the presidency of Donald Trump, we have to be careful that we don't give a type of socio-political bay'ah to the far left. I think there'll be a mistake, and it's not the teachings of Malcolm X, rahimahullah ta'ala. With that, I have another program to be on, so I will just make this quick dua and then quietly excuse myself, please. So please forgive me.
Thank you for staying.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa afdalu salati wa atammu taslim ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. We ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our beloved brother Al-Hajj Malak al-Shabazz amongst the shuhada, amongst the martyrs, and have him be company with the other shuhada, such as Hamza radiallahu an, and Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu an, and the other shuhada. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have us walk in the footsteps of the best of what Malcolm X embodied. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove from us the spiritual diseases that inform racism. We ask Allah to remove from our hearts arrogance. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to remove from us blameworthy envy. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to shine his nur into our hearts and to grant us beneficial knowledge and to grant us refuge from knowledge that has no benefit. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وسلم. السلام عليكم.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Afaf, wrap us up, please.
So I just want to first and foremost say Jazakumullah khairan to everyone who's participated, Dr. Osman, Sister Aisha, Brother Nihad, Brother Edward, and of course Imam Dawood. Jazakumullah khairan. It's, I asked to be a part of this program because I knew what I could gain from it. And inshallah, I intend on listening to it again. And I just want to also say for all those that are viewing, let us please take the lessons that we've learned today, and primarily that we should base ourselves in our faith, ground ourselves in our faith, let that be our guide, and then learn from history. Sister Aisha has said, right? And also to take the stories that Dr. Osman has spoken to us about in regards to Brother Malcolm's humility and his ability to see truth. And those things together, based on our faith, learning our history, inshallah, and then having the courage to see truth, the faults from within, and improving ourselves first and foremost, and then helping our community around us, inshallah, will help to always allow our brother Malcolm X's legacy to live on today, tomorrow, and beyond to every generation. Jazakallah khairan, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate it on behalf of the CARE family, CARE National, CARE New York, and all across the nation. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate the knowledge that all of you, our esteemed panelists, have been able to share with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.